This is so great. But still, I think, can you imagine we can do this? This is amazing that you can see each other.
I know, it really is amazing when it works. It's great.
Yeah,
I love it when it works. It's just a real pain when it doesn't.
yeah. I love it. I love it. And I can see you. You're nice and bright. Like in this afternoon, I feel like it was kind of dark. So it's nice. Well, nice to meet you.
Okay, well, now we can go on with our interview here.
Yeah. Do you mind if we like go back to?
Oh no, go wherever you want to go with it.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah. Okay. Well, so I hear that during COVID, you locked down. You had a little bit of projects you were working on in the studio, but you weren't working with other people, and the classes were down. So that part I think we covered. But I wanted to share like your starting story too. Like you said you started in your 30s. Did you grow up watching your father work in the shop?
well, my father had two professions. He was a bootmaker first, and then he became a mortician and funeral director.
Okay.
And there was a small room in the back of the mortuary where he worked, where he had a little shop. And he made boot tops for another bootmaker in town, and they were good friends, and he was able to use his big equipment, his finishers and stitchers and all that for many years until he again bought his own stuff, So, I mean, I was kind of around it all my life, but not the boot making end of it so much. He was also a really fine leather carver.
Wow.
And did a bunch of beautiful leather work. And I just couldn't get into it when I was a kid because I just wanted it to be finished quicker. I didn't have the patience to stay with it. So
right.
I learned to carve when I was in my early 20s. And I did some leather work around that through the years. And then finally in my 30s, I decided to come back to New Mexico and learn to make boots.
Okay. And so you were saying he was reluctant at first. Did you just did you live with him, or did you commute to see him every day to learn? Was it once a week? How was the pace? Like, was it diving in full time?
Yes, it was pretty much full time. I did do other things on the side to kind of make a living. I painted houses and things like that, so I could make a living while I was learning. But I was living in my grandparents' home, which was next door to my mother and dad. So I was right there on the premises, really. So we worked very closely together, pretty much on a daily basis. And I was able to work with him for 3 years before I opened up my own business.
That's so cool. And then I'm going to just keep on asking you like details, but during the 3 years, you were saying you started with the repair work. He got you onto repairing shoes first.
Well, it all kind of happened together. Because I was learning to make boots along with learning to do repair work, and we would work on the repair work and then we'd work on the boot making. And so it was whatever we had to work on at the time, that we would work. So I kind of just jumped in and learned it all together.
Yeah. And do you think when you teach now, do you teach in a similar way from like start to finish the way you have learned? Okay. And
my class starts with taking measurements, and then it progresses to pattern making and cutting out and putting skiving and putting the tops together. And the first week we build the tops, and the second week we put them on the last and do the bottoms.
Do you still remember the first shoes or first boots that you made with your?
Oh yeah, I still have them. The picture that you had up. Yeah. I was holding a pair of white boots, kind of cream colored boots. Those were my first pair of boots.
Wow, wow. Can you
I don't know where you got that picture, but
Instagram? But
oh, Instagram,
yeah, yeah, like power of social media, which is amazing.
yeah.
Can you still wear those?
I don't wear them. My feet have changed over the years. I mean, that was 40 years ago. So, I mean, my feet have changed and I use a different last now than I did then. I
Uh-huh.
can wear them.
Uh-huh.
Uh, I just don't very often because I have much nicer and more comfortable boots
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
those. So I keep them as a friendly reminder,
Yeah.
but I don't wear them.
Yeah. Do you always show your students your first pair?
Yeah, I do, because they're all going, oh, I can't stitch. My stitching looks awful. And I said, look at this, you know, this is my first pair.
Yeah.
And they look as good as they do because my dad would take them and go, here, let me trim off a little here and let me do a little. So they look a little better. When I teach, I try not to, you know, really touch
Yeah.
the students' boots very much. I
Yeah.
try to work on the hair right along with them, so I'm doing the same step they're doing.
Yeah. Oh, very cool. Very cool. During class, when somebody else is making, when you make a pair, is it for a client or is it more for just
No, well, when I make a pair, yes, it's either for a client or I'm just making a pair of boots. You know, sometimes I'll make myself another pair if I don't have an order on hand to work with them, because I really don't want to work on their boots at all. I want them to do all of that.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you know, I just
understand
have my own pair so I can show them
what to
the
do.
steps to do.
Wow. Very, very cool. Very cool. But did you did you ever have a moment like any challenges during this 40 years of your making boots? Like,
It's been 40 years of challenges. Very early on, of course, I guess myself and Melody Dawkins in California were probably the first women to actually get into the full-fledged boot making of doing the whole process. You know, typically there were women that did the top work, maybe for their husbands, or they worked for boot makers or something, and they did the top stitching. But and I'm sure there were probably some that did the bottom work too.
Yeah.
But we just never heard of them. We never knew about them.
There's no social media back then.
Yeah, there wasn't. This was like and I came back to New Mexico in 1981. So this was when my apprenticeship with my dad began. And Melody was, she's a little younger than I am, but she was working in her dad's shoe shop and learning to make boots at the same time. So we're kind of the matriarchs of women boot makers. And it was difficult in the early years because we were not well accepted. You know, Tyler Beard did all those books on boot making and everything, but I think I was mentioned maybe in his third book, and finally his fourth book, he put up a couple of pictures, but they were terrible pictures. They weren't, the color wasn't right and all kinds of things. And really Melody or I, neither one really got much recognition until Jennifer June's book came out.
Wow.
And then we got some recognition over it. So, I mean, that was probably one of the biggest challenges of my career, was being a woman in the business.
And do you feel like it was something from mostly from the client side, or was it other boot makers you felt like you weren't acknowledged from them?
It was mostly from the other boot makers, I think. I did have a few clients walk out of my shop when they came in and said, I want to see the boot maker. And I said, you're talking to her, and they'd walk out.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, okay, well, that's fine with me. I don't want to make boots for your nasty feet anyway. So.
Yeah, wow. Okay.
But, you know, we all have those customers that we'd rather not deal with. You know? They're more trouble than they're worth.
Absolutely. Was there anything with like not just sex, but about age when you were like 30, say 35 or 40? Would they come to you saying, "Oh, you're so young," or like?
No, not really, not really, because of course, I'm of the old guard now of the bootmakers, and when I was learning, my dad was of the old guard.
Right.
It was him and Dave Little and Tex Robin is still living, but so many of the older bootmakers have passed on now. Jack Reed and all those guys, those were kind of my dad's peers, and so I was kind of in the next generation, and we've lost a few yet in my generation. Eddie Kimmel we lost, and Joe Petruccio, and several of the guys, Al Reynolds.
Nowadays, there's the Bootmakers Roundup. When did it start? Did you have it when you started? Like when?
Oh, yeah.
40 years?
I think I went to the second one that happened. It was in Burnett, Texas. Jack Reed was the bootmaker. I don't remember the saddle maker's name that was involved in getting that started, but Jack Reed was the bootmaker. And they started it in Burnett, Texas, which is a little town outside of Austin.
Oh.
And I think it was the second year that I went. It was just held at the fairgrounds, and it was just kind of it was more like a family reunion of bootmakers. There wasn't a trade show. There wasn't any of that.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a collector there that just had all these boots spread out on a concrete slab. And can anybody identify any of these boots?
Wow.
And we found a pair of my dad's boots in the pile,
Wow.
So that was kind of cool.
That is cool.
So,
and do you remember when that was? Or was your father with you at the time, or?
Yes, we went down there together.
Sorry.
I would say it might have been maybe 1983, something like that. I don't know exactly when it started, but I believe it was the second year. My dad had gone to the first year.
Wow.
And then I went to the second year with him.
Oh, very cool.
And then we went to it was in Burnett then, and then it moved to, where did it move to? It's now in Wichita Falls, Brownwood. It was in Brownwood for several years, and then it got bigger and bigger, and then it moved to Wichita Falls.
Wow. But during those, back then, was it like email? No, there's no email. Hold on. Mailers, direct, like, newsletters.
Newsletters, mailers,
yeah,
telephone calls.
And so you did have a community, which is nice. Is that where you met Melody? Or
well, I don't really remember how we met. We just kind of heard about one another and got in touch. Back then when I had my first shop in Clovis, we had salesmen that came from the leather finding companies that would come through town. They had a van, and they'd have soles and heels and glue and thread and everything on their van. And so
they're the ones
found
that
out
you. They're the ones
I found out about a couple of gals up in Harris near Albuquerque that had a shoe shop, and I was so excited because there were some women in the business, So the next time I came to Albuquerque, I stopped in their shop and met them. And one of them is still here in New Mexico, and we're good friends to this day. And she was one of my first students.
Wow.
Boot students. So,
That is so great. Oh. So I'm just like looking at all my questions too, because it's going everywhere. So you would say your father was your mentor? Like, yes. Yeah. Sorry.
I never really studied with anybody else. I mean, I looked at other people's work. Mm-hmm. When my apprenticeship started was when the Texas boot book came out. That was the very first book that came out about bootmaking, and there were like 12 pictures. And, you know, they were full page pictures and they were great.
Yeah.
And the Tex Robin had some boots in there, and Dave Little and Wheeler. There were several, but I remember I was so taken with Dave Little's work. I thought his work was just really beautiful. So I have a couple of pair that I kind of patterned after some of his designs, you know. But of course, you know, I've gotten little snippets from everybody. You know, I saw, the first time I ever saw Gil work was in Eddie Kimmel's place in Comanche. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. So I came home and figured out how to do it, you know, and I incorporated it in some of my designs. And, you know, I don't think there's really anything new out there. We all steal from one another, you know?
Right. Is it much easier to like ask? I mean, I guess at this point in your career, you don't really need to ask anything. Everybody asks you, but do you feel like now?
Oh no, I still have to ask, you know, and oh yeah, for sure. And you know, I always learn something from every one of my students.
Yeah.
You know, you think, okay, you're the master, you're going to teach it everything, and then they'll do something, and I say, wow, I never thought about doing it that way. That's pretty cool. Yeah. So, you know, you learn something from everybody. And one of the things that I learned from my dad, back in the old days, a lot of those guys were not real forthcoming about how they did things because they were so afraid of competition.
Right.
But my dad would show anybody how he did a certain thing. He was always so willing to impart his knowledge because I think he felt like that the more we all knew, the better the whole industry would be. Yeah. And so I kind of chose to believe that I don't have any competition. Yeah. Yeah. You know, people that like my style of boot won't particularly like some other bootmaker's style of boot, and vice versa. Yeah. You know, I build a little undercut square toe dress boot. That's kind of my specialty. Yeah. You know, the Texas Cowboys with the big round toe and everything aren't going to particularly like my style of boot. Right. But I don't make too many work boots, so you know, I'm a dress boot maker. Right. 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 Yeah. You know, is that something you carry to this day? Is like that's something you learn from him that you feel like, okay, I agree, and you carry to this day is like something that you want to teach what you know, to everybody. I try to tell all my students, I said, don't worry about your competition. Yeah. No, really don't worry about it, because everybody has their own style. They have their own way of doing things. You know, Wes is a good example of that. Wes is a fine bootmaker, and his boots are very similar to mine in some respects, but he's taken what I've taught him and he's made it his own. Yeah. And now he has his own style, and it's similar to mine, but it's not exactly the same. Right. So, I mean, we're all going to do things a bit differently. Right. And he, like you say, like he finds his own clients. Yeah. Yeah. And he's taken some of my patterns and he's manned them up. You know, my patterns are a little feminine, and he gets them and he butches them up a little bit, makes them his own, you know. Okay, yeah, that works, right? Yeah. Yeah, well, that's what it's all about. You know, that's what I want my students to take from me. You know, step by step, there's a way to make a pair of footwear, shoes or boots or whatever, step by step. But it's what you do in the design work, it's how you know, and you know, Wes has taken it to a different level. You know, he's a fine bootmaker. I'm very proud of him. He's done a very, very good job. I have a lot of wonderful students, but he's really kind of taken it and run with it. Yeah. Oh, that's doing so great. A lot with it. And
Do you have
You know,
students that come back?
that's what I want my students to do. I want
Yeah.
them to take what they've learned and then just make it their own.
Right. Are there students that come back to you for like more sessions, or usually?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had a couple that have. I've had several that would like to, and I think some of them probably would have by now, but COVID is kind of
Right.
put the kibosh on that for right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And then do you also have ones that not instead of taking specific just classes, have there been many that just stayed with you to help you with your work, sort of like apprentice?
I've had Murphy has was with me for a couple of years, working with me. She's kind of on her own now. You know, we haven't been working together too much in the last, well, since the middle of June, partially because of the COVID and everything,
Yeah.
you know. But she's kind of doing her own thing now too, and you know, it's there again. She's got her own little style that she's working on, and she's done some great boots, and you know, she'll go on with it. She'll move forward with it. It won't be exactly what I do, but she'll do her own thing.
Right. Would you want somebody, do you have family members or extended family members who would like to take on like what you built up and continue your methods and traditions and the style, you think? Or
probably not. If anybody in my family would do it, it would be my granddaughter. But she's only 14, so you know, that remains to be seen. I made Wes promise to teach her if I wasn't around to teach her by the time she was ready to learn.
Yeah. Well, that's a couple more years, maybe 14. Yeah, my son is 14 too, going on to 15. Yeah.
So, I mean, one of my students, my youngest student was 14. I began teaching through a program through the New Mexico Art Division called the Master Artist and Apprenticeship Program. And they find master artists like myself, and they give us a stipend, and they pay mileage and pay for materials and things like that for the student. And you apply for the grant. And I think I've taught 4 students under that program. That's how I got involved in teaching. They approached me and said, would you be interested in doing this? And I really didn't think I'd want to teach. I never even thought about it. You know, when I was a kid, all women could do was be a wife, a mother, a nurse, a teacher, or a secretary. So I didn't want to really be any of those things, you know. And so I did thought, but I really needed the money, so I did it, you know. And I really learned that I enjoyed teaching. It kind of repumps me. You know, I kind of get tired of what I'm doing. I've done this a long time. And students come in and I work with them and they're so excited. They want to learn so badly. And so it kind of pumps me back up, say, well, this is kind of a cool way to live and make a living. You know?
That's so great. So you said the youngest is 14. How did those boots come out?
They came out really nice. She did a really good job. My biggest problem with her was keeping her interested for more than 3 hours at a time. And, you know, she was local, so I could work with her. You know, it wasn't like we had to do a 2-week stretch. You know, I could work with her. And I finally learned that I could only have her here for about 3 hours at a time. That's about all I could get from her. You know?
Right. Well, that's amazing. Well, but I do understand, like when you're teaching though, it does take time away from your work. So how do you balance that? Like so in that case, in her case, for example, so 3 hours a day, she'll come back a couple days a week and
Well, whenever I do a 2-week class, and that's what my main class is 2 weeks, like I said, that's what I devote my time to. And I may do some of my own work if I'm working on a pair of boots at the time that somebody's there for the class, you know, then I will make a client pair along
along
with them, you know.
Wow. Wow.
But
Okay.
so that, but you know, that's kind of, and really teaching is in that 2-week class is really a very intense class.
Yeah.
Because I mean, we work from 9 to 5 every day so long as we stay on schedule. If we're behind schedule, then we work longer hours or we work weekends or something,
Wow.
you know.
Wow.
And I have a little apartment in the back of my house that I built in the back of my house that I also can rent out to my students if they want to stay here on the premises, you know. Yeah, I can save them a little money from staying in a hotel, and I make a little money, you know, so it works well for both of us.
Yeah.
And it's totally private and everything, you know. So some people take advantage of that. So then, you know, they don't have to go back and forth from a hotel, and they can cook their own meals and stuff. So it makes it a lot easier.
Right. Oh,
but it's still a very intense time. It's very intimate, you know. One-on-one teaching is totally different than teaching 4 or 5 people at a time.
Yeah.
And I'm a real severe introvert, so 2 weeks is about all I can handle. I'm ready to be done. As much as I love it, as much as I love all my students and enjoy their company, I'm ready to be done at the end of 2 weeks. I'm sure they're probably had enough of me too.
It sounds like so much fun.
It is, and I really don't like to do it more than like I like to do a class. If I were on a regular schedule and could schedule it in that way, I'd want to do it like every 6 weeks, 2 weeks, every 6 weeks, you know, give myself
4 weeks of
some time in between, because it really is an intense time.
Yeah. What are you working on now? Do you have a project you were working on during this COVID time? You were saying you had some client work.
Yep. I just finished up a pair of shoes. I put them on Instagram here a while back. They were orthopedic shoes.
Yeah.
That's only the second pair of custom shoes I've ever built. And of course it was a little difficult because of the size difference. You know, there are 2 different sizes. There's a build up and everything. And that was pretty intense. I'm working on another pair of custom shoes right now. And I have one more boot order to get going and get out. I could use some more work, so if anybody out there wants a pair of boots, I was kind of on the point of trying to kind of sort of retire, but financially I'm not able to do it right now, so I'm still working.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Don't quit yet. Not quit yet. Everybody wants, I feel like there's a lot of people out there who's like, I want to learn from you.
I wish there was I've been trying to figure out a way. Of course, I have a video that I've done that's hopefully being edited right now. That's a full class on video, but I'm hoping to get that out soon.
Yes.
But I've been trying to think about how to do it, but you know, I thought, well, maybe I could do some Zoom classes or something, but this technology is so crazy. I'm like, I don't think I want to do this.
I feel somebody who could give it a try. If you feel, I don't know, you do need a little patience with technology a bit, right?
Well, I think you need 2 people. I think you need somebody to do the demonstration and somebody to run the technology.
Right.
You know, and right now I don't know anybody that wants to run the technology. And I've thought about other things too, about going other places and maybe doing workshops or actually, I used to work some in California. One of my students owned a fabric store there, and they did a lot of classes. And I went out there and I did a sandal making class, and I did a couple of leather carving classes, belt classes, and I actually did, I hadn't done any custom shoes, but I taught a shoemaking class and I had 4 students, so, and they all finished their shoes and they look pretty good. So.
Yeah, okay.
So I've thought about, be traveling other places to do that. And once the COVID thing is settled down, we have a vaccine or something and we can travel again. I'd be up for that. I've kind of thought about, there are people that may perhaps have like a shoe repair shop that they would like to learn bootmaking, but they don't have time to come and see me.
Right.
If I had a little RV, I could just go and see them and teach them in their shop, So, I'm looking at that kind of stuff too. Who knows,
Yeah, you can travel the States that way. What part of bootmaking process do you like the best?
I've changed over the years. I used to kind of like the bottom work. Actually, when I was younger, sewing welts was kind of a kick to me, but now it hurts my hands so bad. I hate it, And I've become kind of more interested in doing the top work than I used to be. And it was funny because my dad was probably around my age when I started my apprenticeship with him, and he always said he wished he had somebody to sew his welts for him. He hated sewing welts then, and I've gotten that way myself, But he was always into the top making, and oh my gosh, what a beautiful top maker he was. I dearly loved lasting his tops. I never had any issues lasting his tops. He never measured a draft cut or anything like that. He just eyeballed it and did it, and they were perfect every time. And I could just take his boots and they just lasted like butter, It was so good. And, so
But how did he teach you? How did he teach you this by eye part? Do you also do it by eye too, or do you measure?
Oh no, I've made patterns and everything for everything. I have a heel size for every draft. I have a draft pattern for every heel size. And I mark it, and that's what I cut it. And he added a full inch to the measurements for the side seams. If I make mine with a full inch, they're always way too big in the throat. So I make mine 3/4 of an inch. I've just learned over the years, that I have to modify, because he was just one of those craftsmen that he could just look at it and do it, and
hard to learn.
Well, yeah, and I kept wondering why my tops always swallowed the last and they were too big in the throat and all this stuff. And finally I said, well, he adds an inch. I'm going to try 3/4 of an inch and see how that works. And that worked better for me. And then I also made my little draft patterns, I make them out of file folders, so they fold in the middle, so they're perfect on both sides, And of course, when you make a pair of tops, they stretch. They're not always exactly the same. That's why you trim them. And so I just mark where my draft goes, and then I put my template on there and cut it, And that's how I made it work for me.
And do you always make your blasts, designs, like patterns, everything from scratch, or do you have like templates for some styles?
I have templates. The only patterns, I make a top pattern for every client. But I have vamp patterns and counter patterns and shank covers and front filler and back stays. I have a template pattern for all those. And that's part of what comes with my class. All my students can take their poster board and draw off any of my patterns like that they want
to. And the last, did you develop your last, or do you do custom made lasts for each client?
Years ago, my dad used a Western 6200 last. That was his preferred last style. And when I started my shop, I sent off one of his lasts to a last making company. It was called Omega Lasts. I don't think they're in business any longer.
I've never heard of them.
Yeah, this was like in the early 80s, 1984 or 85, something like that. But I sent one of his laughs off and had them duplicate it.
Mm.
And then I ordered a run of sizes from 5 to 12 and a half in D's and E's.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, through the years, I've supplemented here and there. I bought a run of old military combat boot lasts to make ropers off of and shoes.
Mm-hmm.
I have shoe lasts like that, and I've augmented my lasts through the years.
Yeah.
But I still like that old 6200 style. It's the little square undercut toe. Of course, you can always build that out into a round toe.
Right.
So I just find a last that comes close to fitting the measurements, and then I build it up with leather. And build it up to the style that they want as well.
Yeah, I see. And then that last becomes that client's personal last? No, you can take
it. Not unless they want to buy it from me. If they want to buy it from me after I got it fit up, I'll sell it to them.
Yeah.
But
and they can come back and use the last, maybe.
Yeah, they can come back and use it if they want, or they can take it with them or whatever. Not very many people do that. I have some clients that, I have repeat business from through the years, but I haven't had a ton of them.
No.
So.
Yeah. Where do you get your inspiration from for your top designs?
Well, just wherever I see something that really strikes my fancy. My Day of the Dead boots.
That was fun.
That was a t-shirt design that I saw someplace that I just modified, to make it mine. And, it was so funny, a while back, Lee Miller posted something, and he had a Dakota cologne bottle that had this design on it. And he had used that for a collar pattern on one of his boots. And I took a picture of one of my pairs of boots and put it up and said, same pattern, same box. I got mine, except mine, I used it and then I put Eddie Kimmel's gill work around the top, So. But I thought that was so funny that he and I both used that same pattern off of that.
Yeah.
Dakota cologne, I think. That's probably not even around anymore, but they had this design on the box,
Yeah. Oh, wow, cool.
And I look through the boot books all the time to get inspiration if I'm doing something, and of course my tastes have changed through the years. The older I get, the less glitz and glam I like, I'd rather have a comfortable rough out pair of boots, Back in the day, I wanted to strut the stuff,
That's cool. Do clients also get some give you some input as well? Like, do they come with
Oh, sure. Sometimes they design their own stuff.
Oh, okay.
And if they want to do that, that's fine with me. Usually what I will do is when I take their measurements, I'll make a top pattern, and then I'll draw off the perimeters on there. The ears are going to go here, and the side seams are going to go here, and the tongue's going to go here. Yeah. So here's where you can design in.
Right.
And I let them take it and play with it. And a lot of times they design their own boots. Not too many of them do that, but a few do.
And then if they want something classic, do you kind of show them your archive of photos or?
Yeah. And there's some of them that said, I don't care. Put a stitch pattern on there. I don't care what color. Man, just do it.
Anything.
You do.
That's kind of great. It's like it's all in your hands. Was there ever a moment when they received it or saw it? I guess you have a dialogue though, right? You kind of tell them what you're making.
Oh yeah, you have a dialogue, and of course nowadays it's great because I can take pictures and send them pictures and say, okay, do you like this, or would you rather have this, or you like these colors, or and that's really nice.
Yeah.
Because that makes it a whole lot easier. My dad always had a little saying. He says it's much easier to fit their feet than it is their head. Because trying to get what they are imagining.
Yeah.
You know, because I made a couple of pairs of boots that when they came to pick them up, they looked at them and said, well, those don't look anything like I thought they would.
And what did they do? What do you do?
Well, one woman didn't take her boots.
Really?
She just didn't take them. Yeah.
And then, then what did you do with the boot? Did you?
Well, I've got a whole rack full of them. You know, the people didn't take for one reason or another. And you know, I've put them in different places on consignment, but that never seems to work too well. I always seem to lose more than I get paid for. So, you know, I just
keep it.
You know,
yeah.
If there's anybody out there that wants a stock of nice handmade boots, get in touch with me. I'll send you my boots that I have. I'll make you a deal. Boy, I got a deal for you.
Well, social media, I mean, is actually a good platform. You can post a photo with a price and a size. I wonder if someone would take it.
Well, if you're technically capable of doing that stuff, you can. You know.
Yeah, you can do it. It's just taking a photo. I think.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. But I guess maybe you don't want to do it. Sometimes it's like, okay, memory lane. You're like, okay, this is from, you know, way long when, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not something that you want to pull up. But I think it's worth trying. It's like, you know, there's like, it's like treasure hunt in a way.
Yeah, it is in a way. In a way.